This chart shows the most commonly used variable data types in C++. Each variable that you create must be assigned a data type. The data type determines the type of data the variable or memory location can store. This is especially important in the language C, as the type of variable that you declare will determine what you can or cannot do with that variable. The character data type, which will use the keyword char, C-H-A-R, and notice that it is lowercase. In fact, all of the keywords are lowercase, can store one character and one character only. There is a string data type that we will discuss later, but for now, the character data type can store one character. There are two different classifications of integers. The short integer, which uses the keyword short or int, I-N-T, can store numbers between negative 32,768 to a positive 32,767. The long integers, which uses the keyword long, can store much larger numbers. But in both cases, the only thing you can store in these variables are whole numbers, that is, no decimal places. If your application requires you to use numbers which require decimal points, then you should use either float or double. Float being the keyword and double being the keyword, respectively. As we look at more sample programs, we will discuss more of the different uses for these variable data types. But at this point, keep in mind the various keywords associated with these data types. Here are some simple guidelines to follow when assigning the data type. Assign the short integer, integer, or long integer data type when you are sure that a variable will always contain whole numbers, that is, numbers without decimal points. Which type you choose will depend on the size of the numbers you expect to store in the variable. Assign either the float or the double data type when you need to store numbers with a decimal fraction. Here again, the type you choose, either float or double, will depend on the size of the numbers you expect to store in the variable. Assign the character data type if the variable will always contain one character of data. One last consideration when declaring variable data types, and that is memory. The memory requirement of a data type is an important consideration. If you want to optimize an application's code and thereby conserve system resources, you should use variables with smaller memory requirements wherever possible. For example, although a long integer variable can store numbers in the short range, the long integer data type takes twice as much memory to do so. Therefore, it is more efficient to store a person's age, for example, in a short integer variable. Conversely, you need to use a long integer variable to store the population of a large city. So the bottom line is, the more you know about the data that you're dealing with, the better decision you can make as for the appropriate variable data type. In C++, you must declare a variable before you can use it. You declare or create a variable by entering a C++ statement that specifies both the data type and the name of the variable, as well as its beginning or initial value. Most programmers place the variable declaration statements at the beginning of the program. In other words, as the first statement in the main function. Returning to our demo program, as you can see from our comment, that's exactly what we're doing in this sample, in that we're defining the variables as the very first block of code in our main function. Once the variables are declared, we can now use them in the program. If the C compiler encounters a variable which has not been declared, it will yield an error message. I will look at another sample program which will discuss declaring variables in more specifics and show what happens if you do not declare a variable to have a specific or initial value.